So that's why, hence, the idea that they may actually look forward to reenact, the plot of a popular religious book doesn't seem so crazy to me. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. So in this video, I want to talk about, or rather, I want to ask and then answer a question of why are they religious, alright? And the motivation for this video is a certain discussion, a very brief one, about my previous idea from a few videos back. I'm gonna link it in the description. What is actually going on, I think I've called it. So people have asked some questions regarding it. So the video was about, them, the proverbial they, how they want to, seemingly at least, it's a hypothesis of mine, that they seemingly want to reenact the events of the book of the Apocalypse, okay? So this is the idea, and hence some people have doubted this idea, and I mean, I completely understand this because it's a crazy idea, right? And they've asked me some questions, so I'm gonna briefly address them and then kind of go on a slightly longer rant of why it might be relevant. Why are they religious? So this is why we're talking about this topic specifically, okay? So the first kind of objection or a question was that like Eugene, what you're saying, like this is nonsense, like this is just BS, right? And I actually agree that this is nonsense and this is BS, in the sense that they are, rationally reenacting something, right? Well, first of all, but I mean, I could have answered this in many different ways. I mean, using various rhetorical devices, but I'm just going to use a very simplistic, you may say, Occam's razor type of argument, namely. So we already have a very strong statement that they exist, there are they, okay? So this is a very strong statement, I agree with this, just logically. And then we add to it another strong statement that they are actually rational and maybe even benevolent, right? So, the combination of these two statements, that they exist plus they are rational, is less probable than just one of these statements. It's kind of obvious, right? It's kind of a tautology, actually. So, yeah, so if you agree that they exist, well, the probability that they are also rational, or even smart, or even like whatever other positive adjectives we can use here, is much lower than if they just exist, okay? So they might as well just be malevolent, they might be stupid, they might be blah, blah, blah. Like, just look around you. Does the world look very organized, very smart and rational? I mean, sometimes it does, right? But still, we're kind of a long way away from this, okay? So, yeah, so I'll just answer this argument, that this is nonsense, this is BS, in this sort of manner, that you may actually disagree that they exist in the first place. Then yeah, I agree that this is all nonsense. But if you agree that they exist, I mean, the rationality of them, is a whole different subject, right? Yeah. So another point of criticism was that they, can't they just, they can't just do that, no? Like, what do you mean? So here I would answer again using a good old ad hominem device. By the way, watch my video, better use of ad hominem, quite an old one. Anyway, I'll use ad hominem here exactly. I will say, if you are saying or stating that they cannot possibly do that, well, you probably must have spent like the last 7 years in a coma or something, or maybe you were a child back then or something, right? And plus, you've never studied history, I would assume, right? So this is how I would answer this question, or objection rather. And the next objection I've heard regarding this topic is that why would they want this? Okay, like why would they, basically? And I actually don't have some sort of deep answer to this because, again, it's very hard to understand the motivation of people who are in a completely different position than you are. But I still have a pragmatic answer at the very least. Like, first of all, it could be used to increase the control, right? And secondly, because all of these events that I'm describing, they would be used to increase government regulations, let's say, and even super government regulations, meaning some, you know, how do you call it, like multinational structures, regulations of this sort, right? That's point number one, just increasing control. But it also could be even used to just kind of maintaining control, or like practicing control, if you wish. Like not adding additional strings to pull, but to pull the strings that already exist to check how well they work, if you wish, right? To just kind of enact the control that already exists, right? And the technologies like these have been described for a while. Even Dostoevsky has them in 1872 in his Demons. I think it's translated in English, right? There's a character, Shigalev, who proposes this utopian or dystopian, like whatever you prefer, type of society, where he actually says that we're going to control it like this. Like every once in a while we're going to, I mean, there's a lot of points that he makes how they're going to do stuff, but one of those points is that they're going to like enact these big crises every now and then, just to keep people in check, essentially, right? It's called Shigalevshina in Russian, but in English, I have no idea how they translated this, like Shigalovism, I don't know, something like this. But yeah, it's Demons by Dostoevsky again, 1872, alright? So yeah. And so we're pretty much done with my kind of comments on these objections to my idea, and now let's dive a little bit deeper into history and into like the general topic of the interplay between, let's say, governance and religion, right? Between control and religion. So my point would be here is that they've always been pretty much together, right? Hand in hand. At least if you understand religion as, you know, as broad as possible, in the sense that a interaction of a person with something beyond this person, right? Which basically means other people, right? And that's exactly what power does, or political power, to be more specific, does, right? It basically makes one person submit to another person, right? Or a collective of people. So, yeah. And this is basically the same as what we have in religion, right? A person submits to something else, something bigger than him, either a stronger person or a bigger collective, right? So it's kind of the same thing. It's just aesthetics is slightly different, right? Yeah, but historically, again, I would claim that it wasn't that different, actually, because all of the priests, right? They were lawmakers first and foremost, so they were basically politicians, right? In the modern sense of the word. So, because a lawmaker slash priest, actually, let's just talk about the priest, but I'm gonna prove through this that it's basically the same as the lawmaker. So what the priest does is basically explaining to other people how to behave and how not to behave, right? But this is the law, right? It's the same thing. So, yeah. And plus, any religious ritual is actually governed by its own sort of internal logic, by its own internal rules, right? And through the light of the ritual, kind of the whole society gets illuminated, if you know what I mean. By the way, watch my video about the Illuminati. I'm gonna link it in the description. So anyway, these rules kind of, you know, permeate into the world through religion, right? So the laws kind of permeate through society, and thus society becomes more organized, and supposedly, if the laws are good, the society becomes stronger through becoming more organized, right? So this is a pretty straightforward stuff. So you can see from here that the priest, a religious figure, and the lawmaker are basically the same people, right? At least historically and kind of fundamentally, right? It's just that today, instead of, let's say, gods that gave us the law that the priests interpreted and gave to the people, right? Instead of this sort of chain, we have like a democracy with this, you know, like the people. The people is our God now. The people tells who they want to see as their lawmakers, and then these lawmakers pass the laws onto every individual, right? But generally, it's the same idea. So yeah. And plus we have the, like, all the moral things from this, right? Because, well, how you are supposed and not supposed to behave, it's morality, right? So, but that's a whole separate topic. Again, here I would like to talk about the history of religion, but I actually have a very long video on this topic specifically, and I don't want to make this video way too long. So I'm just gonna reference you to that previous video. It's called Brief History of the Church, right? Spoiler alert, I mean, there's some pretty alternative, to say the least, at least historical opinions are presented. But to summarize it briefly again, why was the Old Testament, roughly speaking, invented? Is to maintain and facilitate trade in the Mediterranean, roughly 700 years ago. I told you, I mean, it's non-orthodox dating at the very least. Then, when France and Germany, again, roughly speaking, became too strong, they wanted their own religion, because, again, the church controlled everything. It was the only way of organizing of society, really, at least on this scale, right? Like, long past tribal scale. So, yeah. So they've invented Christianity, Germany and France, roughly speaking. Right, so it happened roughly 500 years ago, and today we know it, I mean, it's kind of legendized, mythologized as Protestantism, but it was really just the appearance of Christianity. So this is the brief history of the church. But watch the video, I mean, it's pretty useful, I would claim. Yeah, but what I didn't say in this video is that there was actually a continuation of this flow, right? Namely that roughly 300 years ago, another religion appeared basically from the same stem, from the same root of the God of the Mediterranean, you know, the God of the Old Testament, roughly speaking. And this new religion was called Freemasonry, right? So Freemasonry is basically, just as Christianity is a slightly modernized Catholicism / Judaism. Again, watch my video for more details. Freemasonry is just a slightly modernized version of Christianity and Judaism and Catholicism, right? Yeah. So, and you know, if ever since Catholicism, we've had Moses, right, as the main person, basically, the person who brought the law to people, brought the law, the first lawmaker, basically. For Freemasonry, it's actually Adam, right, the main figure. Why? Well, it's because during development of Catholicism and Christianity, like, the Mediterranean was still the main area of where everything happened. And I mean, forgive me for this Europocentrism, but this is the civilization that we know. Right? It's a civilization of Mediterranean, basically. Like, I don't really care about any others, TBH. And what was I saying? Yeah, and during Freemasonry, during the appearance of Freemasonry, that was roughly 300 years ago, like, the international trade has already became kind of a trivial thing, right? So now you kind of need to expand it even more. So that's why it appeared. Like, at least that was one of the factors why it appeared. So yeah. So let's return to the main topic from this historical intermission. So as we can see, hopefully, the very foundation of the modern political power and, like, just general power system in the world, it has a religious, how do you call it, source, right? Or at least tightly connected to the religion, right? So therefore, I'm kind of returning again to my main point. Therefore, the assumption about their religiosity, if you wish, has a solid historical foundation. Yeah. So to speak very superficially, roughly speaking, provisional, you know, Judaic bankers of 14th, 15th, 16th century, they're still here, basically, you know. Like, they've been handing off all the, you know, loans for all the wars, for all the revolutions, including the Industrial Revolution, by the way, including all the revolutions of today, etc., etc. And they've kind of blended in the world aristocracy, which is basically just one big family, right? I have a video about this, how the elites control you or something like this. I'm gonna link it in the description. And when I say Judaic bankers, by the way, I'm not saying Jews. Again, Jews is a very new concept. Jews as an ethnicity, as the people, right? It's a very new concept. Again, it's like 200 years old at best. Okay. When I'm saying Judaic, I'm saying people following the Old Testament. And pretty much any civilized person in the Mediterranean 600 years ago, or 500 years ago at least, was following the Old Testament, right? So, people of any nation, right? As we would have said today. But they would all be Judaic, right? But not Jews, right? In the sense of peoples. Like a person in Germany, you know, a blonde with blue eyes, blue-eyed blonde, they were Judaic, right? Etc., etc. People in Russia were Judaic, etc., etc. Yeah, it has nothing to do with Jews. Yeah, and to kind of, so basically my point here is that this old religious power structure, it's still here, right? Because why wouldn't it be, right? Like again, returning to the topic of Great Reset, there were no Great Resets since then. There were like minor refurbishments here and there, right? But yeah, the bankers are still there. They're still roughly the same family. You just don't know it, right? Because you look at the politicians, you look at celebrities, and they have nothing to do with this, with the real aristocracy, you know? Yeah, with the real elite. So to go a level up further, we can say that just as this god of ancient, you know, in quotation marks, Mediterranean on 700 years ago, this god was telling the, you know, the people of the Mediterranean, basically, to not harm, let's say, their neighbors, right? And not do bad stuff generally. The very same God is telling them to also behave. Because if that was not the case, why would them not actually, you know, kill each other? I think they would, considering they're probably not the very moral people. And to rephrase one of the, well, to rephrase Sartre, basically. I was thinking about how would I qualify him, but it was just Sartre. So Sartre said something like, l'enfer et les autres, I actually don't know how it's in French. Basically, hell is the others, right? Which is a very humanistic idea from the author, by the way, of an essay called Existentialism is Humanism, right? And this guy says, hell is the others. But anyway, I'll paraphrase this for my own purposes, and I'll say, God is the others, right? So God is what you do, when you're doing something for God, what you're really doing is you're doing it for the others. Even when nobody's looking, right? So you, park your car where it's, you know, supposed to be parked, like you throw garbage in the garbage can, etc. Like you don't do bad stuff even when no one's looking. But you're doing it for God, you know, but you're actually doing it for others, you know. So yeah. So this is what God is the others. At least in this political sense, right? Of course, there is some purely, let's say, spiritual or aesthetic or philosophical aspects of the idea of God, but we're not talking about this here. So yeah, and since Freemasonry is actually basically the default religion of any French government official, for quite a while, again, almost 300 years, and by proxy, any European government official as well, it also plays the very same role there, the Freemasonry. So this religion is like a parallel control circuit, you know. Basically, like if you're not afraid of the police, well, you should at least be afraid of God, right? So maybe you won't get caught, but please, come on, behave, right? So there's one circuit of control, which is like a purely, you know, government bureaucracy, basically. And there's a parallel circuit of control, which is like happens behind the scenes in all these religious rituals of Freemasonry, right? Basically, this is what I'm saying. Yeah. So it works both for peasants, so to speak, and for the people who control them. So, and even in unorthodox, wink wink, religions like communism and National Socialism, they also have this parallel circuit of control. It's just not called God, it's called the party, right? The Communist Party, the Nazi Party, etc. But everything else, all the functions are actually literally the same, just like Freemasonry in European government officials, not just European, by the way. I mean, Freemasonry is a global phenomenon. Or like Catholicism / Judaism, it's the same thing. Like 600 years ago, or like Christianity, like 300, or like 400 years ago, never mind. Doesn't really matter. So yeah, it's all the same thing, basically. Yeah, and we're moving closer and closer to the conclusion. So let's move even a level up further, like just, or step back a little bit and ask ourselves a question like, what would I do if I had all of my material problems solved, right? So basically, imagine you have infinite money. What would concern you then, right? And they have infinite money. They can literally create money out of nothing, right? As much as they want. So basically, we might assume that their material problems are already solved. So what kind of problems would they think about then? Well, those would be immaterial problems, aka religious problems. That's a pretty simple logic, really. You may only object to this, probably. You may say, well, Eugene, there's not just religion as in the sphere of immaterial. We also have like aesthetics / art, basically. We also have philosophy, and we also have science, for example, right? There's probably some other categories, but I don't think it's very useful to use any other categories, at least for the sake of this discussion. So, but the problem is, with these other three categories, is that to be concerned with art, you actually have to be a pretty rare person. You have to, feel very, your feelings should be very finely tuned, right? And that's very rare. And just statistically, it's very unlikely that among them there would be a lot of these people, right? Because there's not a lot of them to begin with, right? So, unlikely, let's conclude. Then for philosophy, you basically have to suffer a lot even to start doing philosophy, right? Which again doesn't sound very likely. And for science, you have to work a lot, Like again, I'm not gonna even start this discussion of how, what's the word in English? I actually don't know. Fruitless would be the word, probably. I was thinking of some other, but I can't find it. So how fruitless most of scientific work is, really. Like 90 to 95% of scientific research, if you do it honestly, you get zero results, right? Or negative results. So it's basically slave labor. That's what science is. So also not very likely that they are going to do it. It's rather they'll just bring a bunch of money to some scientific institute and tell them to work, right? That would be more likely. So what is left for them, per se, is just religion, right? So yeah. Only with religion you can basically sit on a couch and be, I don't know, an archbishop of an Orion arm, right? Or something like that. Or the Grand Vizier or Grand Master of the Order of the Carbon Life Forms or something like this, right? And you can, kind of like project your influence outwards to the stars or something to that effect. So yeah, so by all these reasons, for all these reasons, I assume that they are religious. So this long rant was the answer to this question that I've asked in the title. I'll probably not even formulate it as a question. I'll probably write it down without a question mark. So yeah, so that's why, hence, the idea that they may actually look forward to reenact the plot of a popular religious book doesn't seem so crazy to me, okay? Yeah, and in some of these discussions, people have mentioned, that's already a PS, like we've kind of concluded. So, as a PS, I would add that in some of these discussions, some people have mentioned Peter Thiel, right, with his obsession with the same popular religious book, right, specifically the part about the Antichrist, right, which looks incredibly silly, and I actually don't know what to think about this. I'm gonna be completely honest, but what I'm gonna say about this is that Peter Thiel is a completely fictional figure, not in the sense that the person doesn't exist, but in the sense that, well, just read his biography. Okay? It makes even less sense than the biography of Epstein, for example. Right? So some hobo from immigration suddenly gets to like the top level universities in America. And then, after that, even more suddenly, he gets like millions of dollars of, beginning, how do you call it? Initial capital from his friends, right? Well, apparently he does have a lot of friends up there, if you know what I mean. So basically what I mean is that Peter Thiel is just a puppet of American intelligence. And that's pretty much it. So, unlike Elon Musk, by the way, Elon Musk is is much more closer to them, I would say. Again, he's a bastard of a British king, after all. Edward VIII, I think. Anyway, so basically, my point is, you can just ignore what Peter Thiel says, right? Like, it's so difficult to untangle, like, you need to talk to him, probably, to understand what's on his mind, really, you know? So, yeah. But speaking of Antichrist, obviously, people would be branded, you know, with the sign of a beast, or whatever it's called in English. People would get a daily dose of bread through a retina scan, or something like this, very soon. And it's pretty obvious, I would say. Right? But so what? So what is the question that I'm asking to Peter Thiel? Right? I don't know why he's telling all this. I honestly don't know. But hopefully this clarifies something. Again, if you have something to add or something to ask, welcome to the comments. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.